Tonight, 10 takes on the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department and questions about high-tech surveillance equipment.
Now, they assured us the device known as Stingray is not being used here. But News 10 investigative reporter Tom Jensen has new evidence suggesting otherwise.
When you dial up or text a friend or surf the internet using a mobile connection, that cell tower you think you are connecting to might not really be a cell tower. It could be a police or sheriff department Stingray.
It's essentially a fake cell phone tower.
Hani Fakhouri has been fighting to protect Californians from invasive surveillance techniques for more than a decade.
We've been assured and promised that they're not being used in that way, but we don't really know for sure.
The Stingray is mobile, and it can capture all data from anyone who connects to it. In doing so, critics say the Stingray creates a problem of illegal searches and Fourth Amendment violations.
The California courts have not weighed in on the proper framework for how the police should be using these devices.
News 10 filed public records requests with all local police and sheriff's departments in California asking whether they use the fake cell tower devices. And we found Oakland has one, so does LA, San Francisco, and San Jose. A total of 6 communities admit they have them. But the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department told us it does not own or use Stingrays and has no records responsive to our request.
The Sacramento Sheriff has an obligation to respond under the Public Records Act. If they're withholding something from you, they should tell you that they're withholding and what the basis for it is.
Certainly they shouldn't be lying about it, saying that they don't have it when they do.
Peter Scheer is with the First Amendment Coalition and promotes open government and access to public records. Scheer is concerned about our records request in Sacramento because we showed him documents from other law enforcement agencies who applied for grants to buy Stingrays. That's where we found out the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department might in fact be using a Stingray device despite its responses, especially in these records from San Jose Police. San Jose PD said they did extensive research and contacted police agencies in California that utilize this type of technology, and that the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department was one of them. We also obtained this receipt from Sacramento County showing the Sheriff's Department paid more than $11,000 for a piece of equipment sold by the same company that makes Stingrays. It acts like a filter and amplifier for Stingray-type devices. And recently, after we were armed with that new information, the Sheriff's Department modified its response, telling us in an email the Sheriff's Legal Counsel is coordinating a response to our questions.
You don't know whether that means, in fact, no responsive records exist, or there are no responsive records that do exist that we're willing to give you.
Or maybe that response will be, well, sorry, we misled you. We do have the technology, but I guess that's another issue. But still, this technology, it could snare totally innocent people. They're just not listening in to the bad guys that they're after. Anybody could be logging onto this.
And that's the Fourth Amendment issue here. It's the illegal search and seizure. That's what the Fourth Amendment says. You can't just cast a wide net over everybody and start pulling in information or going door to door in somebody's apartment building looking for somebody, knocking down the doors of everybody to find one person or to find out if other people are committing crimes.
You know, unlike a new vehicle or some other piece of equipment, law enforcement agencies do not advertise that if they do indeed have this. Is there a perception by some law enforcement agencies that there could be a constitutionality problem with this piece of equipment, so they just try to keep a low profile?
Well, I don't know if they feel that there's a constitutional problem here, but I do know that they're being very secretive, and one of the reasons might be is that the company that makes these, the Harris Corporation, makes them sign a non-disclosure agreement. So they're told that they can't talk about these things. Even when we get these documents, when we're able to, they're heavily redacted. There's hardly any information in there. The problem is you can't have a non-disclosure agreement that just supersedes the California Public Records Act.
Well, the technology is called a Stingray, and it can collect data from your cell phone, even when you are not the target of a criminal investigation.
Our investigative team exposed how local law enforcement agencies have been using the spy technology for years without the public's knowledge. Investigative reporter Tom Jensen trying to get answers from Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones.
After numerous refusals to speak with News 10 about his department's use of a high-tech surveillance device called a Stingray.
We've dealt with your incessant badgering of our department over these issues.
This is a privacy issue.
we were forced to find Sheriff Scott Jones in public.
Good, how are you?
Doing very well.
I'm Tom Jensen with News 10. We wanted to talk to you about your use of stingrays.
We contacted Jones before a recent Sheriff's Academy graduation, and when we asked him about stingrays, his demeanor changed.
Are you proud of disrupting an academy graduation?
That's why
in
we're
this way?
talking to you before.
This is why we are so concerned about who uses stingrays and how they use them. Stingrays are traveling cell towers controlled by law enforcement agencies. They are so powerful, they force all cellular devices in up to a mile radius to connect to them. And they can download all of the data coming into and going from the phones and tablets connected. It's a real concern for civil rights groups who say police and sheriff's departments use this spy technology and refuse to divulge how or even if they use it.
There's a lot of secrecy about the use of these devices.
Hani Fakori is the head of a nonprofit group trying to stop the use of high-tech surveillance equipment on large groups of people, especially when that surveillance is done without judges' approval and defense attorneys being informed.
We've been assured and promised that they're not being used in that way, but we don't really know for sure.
During our investigation, it became clear the Sacramento Sheriff's Department couldn't get its story straight about using stingray technology.
Originally, it gave us an invoice from the maker of the device, the Harris Corporation, showing the department bought a high-powered antenna that extends the range of stingrays. Then it said, quote, "This technology comes with a strict non-disclosure requirement. It would not be appropriate for us to comment." And finally it said, more documents from the Harris Corporation, quote, "exist that were not disclosed." The department's attorney said the sheriff didn't have to give us the records and cited all sorts of public records exemptions, including a state law written to protect railroads.
We fully comply with the Public Records Act. We've given you documentations that were responsive.
Well, one of the quotes from the attorney was something that had to do with rail safety, which has nothing to do with stingrays.
Are you proud of disrupting an academy graduation?
That's why
in
we're
this way?
talking to you before.
The secrecy about the devices starts with the Harris Corporation, which forces every agency purchasing a stingray to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which states the device's capabilities are not for public knowledge. The sheriff has been more secretive than others. We obtained Oakland Police Department records showing it used a stingray for all sorts of criminal investigations. And when the San Jose Police Department applied for a federal grant to buy a stingray, it said it consulted with the Sacramento Sheriff's Department about its use of stingrays.
We found that especially odd because the court administrator's office told us they asked every judge whether or not they approved warrants for the use of stingrays, and every single one said no. The district attorney's office told us the same thing. The sheriff's department never divulged it was using a stingray or a like device for any criminal investigation.
I also went through more than 1,000 warrant applications filed over the past 2 years at the Sacramento County Courthouse. Not a single one ever mentions the use of stingrays. There are a few for pen register or trap and trace warrants. Those allow agencies to collect incoming and outgoing numbers from a single cell device. But it's only from those designated devices, not from people in a wide area like a stingray does. And there are dozens more warrant applications which have been sealed with no explanation of why they are confidential or even which agency applied for them.
If you're using stingrays, I think there are some questions about
Okay,
that.
then this interview can be over.
But the judges and the DA even said that they didn't know that you had one of these devices. Why is that?
I have nothing more to say to you.
We reached out to the sheriff's department after that interview and asked if he'd rather sit down and talk to us in a more formal setting, but once again, he declined to be interviewed. Dale and Christina? But the judges and the DA even said that they didn't know that you had one of these devices. Why is that?
I have nothing more to say to you.
News 10 kept the pressure on in our search for the truth about the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department's use of a cell phone surveillance device called a stingray. And today, an admission from the sheriff. Now, News 10 has already revealed evidence that the Sacramento Sheriff's Department is using a stingray or a similar device, despite the sheriff's refusal to release any records about its purchase of a stingray. News 10 investigative reporter Tom Jensen was finally able to get some of those records earlier this week after our lawyers got involved. And Tom, this has to be startling news for for prosecutors and judges and defense attorneys. They told you they had no idea that the Sheriff's Department would be using this type of device.
That's right. We asked them several times, and prosecutors told us the sheriff never told them that his department is using a Stingray or like device, and court administrators said no judges were ever informed about its use either. But it's especially shocking for defense attorneys who told us this information was never shared with any of them in any criminal case.
Then this interview can be over.
Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones became upset when questioned about his department's use of a device called a Stingray. This week, we received a heavily redacted invoice from the sheriff showing his department purchased items totaling more than $240,000 from the maker of the Stingray in 2006. The portable technology, controlled by law enforcement agencies, mimics cell towers and forces every cell device in a certain radius to connect to it.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, sir, but,
Sounds like you do.
I have to be an advocate for people's privacy rights. You guys are using a device that's all-encompassing. It sounds like a general search, a Fourth Amendment violation.
Is there a question in there?
We had a lot more questions about Stingrays that the sheriff would not answer. But in a statement released on his department's Facebook page today, the sheriff said the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department currently possesses and utilizes such a device, which is a cell site simulator. The device is used to locate a person's known cellular device pursuant to and in full compliance with the law. Privacy and civil rights groups say the equipment can be configured to gather any information shared through the fake cell towers.
I think that most attorneys in the government and most judges acknowledge this is in fact a search.
Mark Reichel has defended people in federal and state criminal cases for more than 20 years. He says he has been keeping his eyes on the NSA-type surveillance equipment, but had no idea the sheriff had been using the technology for 8 years. And he says he has not heard of a single case where prosecutors or the sheriff's department admitted they used a Stingray in their investigations.
If this was in violation of the law, which I believe it is, then yes, all the evidence should be thrown out.
We reached out to the sheriff again today to talk about his statement, but we did not hear back from his department, which has routinely refused to work with News 10 since I asked him those tough questions about a month ago. It has been systematic, too. Denials for interviews and information on stories that have nothing to do with Stingrays. Even today, when he released his statement in a press release, he sent that press release to every news outlet but us.
Yeah, and there's been a little blackballing of late going on with the Sheriff's Department. I want to ask you about a recent Supreme Court case having to do with cell phones. When someone is picked up and their cell phone is taken off them, police may not search that cell phone. The Stingray can essentially do that without them even arresting you or picking you up.
That had to do with people who were pulled over saying that police couldn't just scoop up your cell devices without a warrant and then start searching through them. But this would hold true in this case as well. I went through 2,000 different warrants filed in the Sacramento Superior Court. Couldn't find one where the Sheriff's Department said that it was using a Stingray or a like device when it went out to get a warrant. So, and like I said, prosecutors and judges said that they never heard about this device being used either.
I think the most disturbing part of this, I mean, I've been at News 10 for almost 20 years. I've known Scott Jones a long time. Good man. Worked under John McGinnis, another good man. Has been the most transparent of law enforcement agencies. But I think what bothered me about this story, and continues to do so, is that this is the federal government telling our local elected officials, you may not talk about this.
Well, that's what we're being told today. The Sheriff's Department said that, in fact, in his statement, he said that they were forced to sign a confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement with the federal government. We have also requested that non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement, but we haven't heard back from them. I'd like to see that. We do know that they signed a non-disclosure agreement with the Harris Corporation, which makes the Stingrays. But you're right, this is a little bit different. This is the federal government possibly saying what your local law enforcement agencies can and cannot release.
Well, yeah, whether it's a federal government or a private company, for them to be able to tell us what our local elected officials can tell us is disturbing.